So my question is about the three levels of teaching, and you were talking about it now more from the teacher side, and the question is more from the student side, because we don't always have Krishna in front of us. So the question is, how is one to know which level of the teaching is correct for oneself at any given moment? Because we don't remain at a certain level of consciousness always. And I have
You
some
don't
follow-up.
you are trying to ask which level of teaching is correct for the student, right? So the student is saying, I will assess the level of teaching and then determine which particular level is good for me, right? So the student being the student being where he is and who he is, will assess the teaching. Will he?
That's why I said assuming that the teacher is not there.
No. The teacher is always there. The problem is that the student wants to remain who he is. The student doesn't have to assess the teaching. The student, first of all, has to say, I am not right as I am. Instead of assessing the teaching, the student has to assess himself. And that opens him up, that cracks him up. If I want to assess the teaching, how will I assess the teaching? According to my own standards, right? And according to my standards, no teaching is good enough. Because I am already good enough. All teachings are telling me you are not good enough. In my field, I am already good enough. Therefore, all the teachings are just lies. Why must I accept lies? Is there anything else that any bit of teaching tells you? All teachings just come and declare to you are stupid. Right? In my own eyes, I am the wisest one on the planet. The teacher is telling me you are stupid. I am the wisest one, therefore the teacher is stupid. Hence, there can be no coming together. One of them has to accept that he is stupid. Either the teacher or the student. Now the teacher sees that the student, being as stupid as he is, will never accept that he is stupid. Therefore, the teacher must now pretend to be stupid and meet the stupid student at his own place, the student's own place, that is. That's how the game proceeds. How do I assess the teaching? How do I even know that there are various levels of teachings? Who is the assessor? I am the assessing party. Yeah. So what will I assess? The only thing that I'll assess is that except for me, everything is just bullshit. Or only those parts of teachings are somewhat considerable that align to my interests, that do not seem to threaten me. So only those parts will be somewhat acceptable. So it doesn't happen that way. There has to be, you see, the seed, the shell has to be prepared to crack open from the inside. Only then it can receive the sunlight. That willingness has to come from within the seed. Obviously, the right conditions must be provided, otherwise the seed will never break out. But like the window panes, like the glass, like the doors, they have to be open to receive the guest. And that opening is a sovereign decision of the individual. There can be no authority there. There can be no compulsion there. It's a matter of either realization or love, or simply boredom. It is possible that one gets so frustrated with being himself that he says, I'm going to throw all the doors open now because I'm just fed up of being myself. So something has to give in.
But could you also say that it can be a matter of exposure? Because what if the situation is such that in contact with the teacher, then the contrast kind of really reveals that in that light, the situation, what you're saying, then it makes sense. But then when the session is over and things return to whatever they are, then that contrast might not really. You said realization, love, and boredom. What if none of them are there? Then? I'm not saying it's like that. I'm merely.
I understand. You're saying it does not last.
You can say that. Take it from there. Yes. Yes.
But then one has to hang on to whatever works for him, no?
Mm-hmm.
Why must I wish that it lasts? For me, it should be sufficient that I do get to see that there exists some practical interval in which an effect does take place. It's too much for me to wish that the effect must last even after the event. I got to know that the effect does happen in the duration of the event. So this much is certain, that there is an effect under certain given conditions. Now my demand is, even after those conditions are removed, the effect must persist in some way, even if in a weakened way, yet the effect must remain. But isn't that too much to ask? My question is, I mean, if I were really desperate, I would say, if the effect remains in the session, why can't I always remain in the session? Why must I wish that the effect must remain after the session? If the effect remains in the session, fine. I love the effect so much, I will remain in the session. That's it. And then the entire search will be for ways to perpetually remain in the session. Right now the search is a bit misdirected. Right now the search is how to make the effect remain after the session. That's what the direction of the search is. Now how about searching for ways to perpetually remain in the session? If the thing is lovely, why must it ever conclude? Why must it ever get over? If I am in love with something, why will I allow the thing to ever end? Don't allow the session to end for you.
I guess. No, I get what you're saying. It's just that in some sense I could say that I could ask myself that what else am I doing, because You mean it in
No, no,
another way?
no.
Okay, okay.
Julius, the level of doing is the Vyavharik level.
Hmm.
One has to learn to coexist at two levels. At the level of doing, there would always be the world. At the level of doing, you would never find the teacher or the teachings or the session.
Hmm.
One has to learn to have the highest level at his heart,
Hmm.
and then what is at your heart would determine what you do. The level of doing has to be left free. Don't expect too much from it. You have to make the session perpetually continue in your heart. And then the session will decide what you do in the world. Doing is not the plane where change can be initiated. Doing is the plane where the change is manifested. Doing is the plane where the change becomes visible. It is not the plane where the change is initiated. The change is in the Paramarthic plane, the highest plane. There you have to be in the session all the time. Carry the session in your heart. And then see how doings change. And even if the doings do not change, it doesn't matter. Because what matters is the session, and the session would always be there. What else is there to matter? One has to learn to coexist in these two planes at the same time. I operate here, but I belong there. I'm on a mission. I don't belong here. I belong there, though I operate here. I have come here, but I'm not a native. My hometown is there, Amarpur. That's my hometown. I'm just on a visit. I'm here to do certain things. This is not my permanent address. One has to have two addresses, no? The permanent address and a functional address. Yeah, temporary address. So all this is temporary, functional. One has to remember both his addresses. The session will be found whenever you will go to your permanent address. That's the place where the session is always on.
Would you understand if it's, what if it feels like that I am in the session, outside the session, but then when I come to the real session, I realize in that contrast that I actually wasn't in the real session. If you get the,
I get that.
what if that's the situation? What if that's the situation? That you think that you're on?
Then if I were you, I would quit everything. I'm still young. I would give 1, 2, 3 years of my life to physically being in the session till I find that the session within has started resonating exactly and authentically with the session outside. Otherwise, what I'll be carrying within in the name of the session will be some kind of a duplicate session.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem. It's not about what you're missing, but what you're getting or think that you're getting. Because if that's good enough, then who needs the real thing? Like, obviously you need the real thing, but you get, like, you must understand. Yeah.
See, there's nothing much at stake. What is anybody gaining by being in any particular corner of the world? You know what space and time and locations and geographies and these things are, right? You know what these things are. You also know there is not much to be gained or lost in terms of being here or being there, even in the material sense. So makes sense to commit oneself to physical presence till the point one starts finding that the words outside have become the words inside. Now there is no more a misalignment. Now the sessions can wonderfully continue, or one can take the help of technology. We are a developed people now, technologically at least. So that would save the attendant risks of travel and this and that and all the disruptions that travel brings. Listening in continuity is magical. And throughout the centuries, across the world, knowers have emphasized on the importance of continuous listening. You know, in the Jain tradition, they call the student as the listener. It's so instructive. They don't even call the student as the student. They say he's the listener, Shravak. That is the essential quality of the student. He listens. So continuous listening is sufficient. Even in the Guru Granth Sahib, they say that if you can just listen with attention, that will be enough. But that listening has to continue over a period of time. And that has to be the most important thing in your life. So the universe is all around you, and the listening is all within you. That's the place you must give to the listening. Eating, walking, talking, sleeping, the listening must continue. And technology can be a great aid.
Some of these new sessions I have listened to like copious amounts of times, like seriously. Some of them have been like that, like it's not like I haven't immersed myself in them, but it feels like what I can't understand is that why somehow the contact and the kind of my receptivity is very open and things seem very self-evident. But then at some point, even if I'm listening very fully, it feels like I start going to other teachings, and I'm not even sure why. It's like instinctive. It's like something is not clicking, so I'm going somewhere else, only to come back to this and realizing that, oh, I've missed again. But it's not like I have an active feeling of being against whatever is being said here, at least consciously. It might be a subconscious thing, but actively I don't feel like that. It's just like that sometimes it's self-evident and sometimes I'm not getting it at all, and I don't.
No, what is happening is, Julius, you're not going to someone else. You are again and again going back to yourself. See, to the ego itself is the biggest teacher.
Yeah, obvious.
So any other teacher is a threat to ego the teacher.
Yes.
So ego the student keeps going back to ego the teacher. You're not going to someone else, you're going back to yourself again and again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just that ego would not want to say that I'm going back to myself, so it would give itself the name of some other teacher.
Yes.
So instead of AP, now I'm listening to BC,
Mm.
right? So, but that BC is no one else but you.
Mm.
So that's the way the whole thing. Now, what to do? Then there is the way of Vedant, the way of Upanishads, dialectical way. Because listening pre-assumes a student not in dialogue with himself. Listening pre-assumes a level of immersion in which the student is in contact only with the teacher. But that's too much to ask for. The ego loves itself much more than it loves the teacher. Therefore, it wants to be in contact with itself rather than the teacher.
Teacher.
So, when we say listening suffices, then there is a big condition there that you are listening only to the teacher.
Teacher.
But if the listening is divided, you are listening to the teacher and then you are listening to yourself, and then you are listening to the teacher and listening to yourself, then there is a problem. The solution to that problem is the method of the Upanishads, which is the method of dialogue. Which is the method of dialogue. And now that's where whatever you have learned from yourself by listening to yourself must come out to be scrutinized by the teacher.
Mm.
And then what is false would probably get exposed and therefore dissolved. But even that can happen with the aid of technology. The dialogue too is possible.
Yeah. And I mean, it's as I said earlier, it's not that I feel particularly resistant. It's just like it happens, like you just slide away, you know. And then when you remember, it's not like some kind of a feeling of that repentance and how am I so fallen? It's just like, oh, I forgot again. That it doesn't feel like it's not like a punch to the face or anything. It's just like a right. This is what I was missing. But yeah, it has been going on pretty long. Maybe that's kind of the problem. It's been the problem since the beginning. So what can
You
expect?
just probably just need to assure yourself that the thing is within reach.
Yeah.
You probably need to assure yourself that the whole thing is not impossibly difficult. That's the reason while we call that as infinitely distant, we also call that as intimately close. Because if you just call it distant, then there is hopelessness. And that's what probably the ego is searching for. Hopelessness with respect to dissolution or liberation. Since liberation cannot be achieved, let me make peace with my bondages.
No, I have done that very consciously at some point.
Yeah. So you don't need to be dejected. You need to probably assure yourself that it's possible. Let me commit myself to the process. And maybe a displacement within is possible, and it's possible in real time. Not that it should take 40 years. Maybe it's possible in months, maybe it's possible in years, maybe it's possible in weeks, who knows. And when that reassurance is there, then there is a certain urgency. When you see that something is possible, then you want to be more committed to it.
Yes. No, I get what you're saying. Just sometimes I even feel just like, because the people who have been with you the longest, they obviously have been in very close contact with you. And sometimes I've even had the feeling that what if this kind of a thing is not really meant to happen without that kind of a contact? That what if you need that kind of a very like close kind of connection for the real kind of I don't know, but sometimes I've
Julius, you could have you could have looked at it both ways, no? You could have you choose to look at the students around me, and you say that the students around me do have a teacher to closely connect to. You look at the students around me, but you don't look at the student that I am. Who do I have? Who do I have? Who did I ever have?
good point.
Yeah, thank you.
For once, give him some credit.
All credit to you. You at least have a screen to look into, and you find a face there, huh?
Yeah.
You find a face there. I never even had a face. All I had were words.
Yeah, you have my sympathies. And yeah, I'm reminded by that one quote. We can maybe close with it, unless you have something more in mind. But I think it was, "You're not missing the secret, you're missing the obvious." It's it proves to be very.
We choose to miss. We choose to pick. We choose to miss. It's a choice. Otherwise, everything is obvious. Actually, it is with purpose that we choose to pick and choose to miss. So let love overcome all other purposes. Pick that. Why pick this? What's the point? There's no point in. There is no fun in playing games beyond a point. Actually,
No, yeah.
another thing, self-observation is not about keeping an eye on oneself, because keeping an eye on oneself implies judging oneself through preconceived value standards.
Yeah.
So if you will judge yourself, you'd be disappointed that progress is not happening, because the very definition of progress will come from the ego. And whatsoever change is happening, if that will not correspond to the definitions of the ego will not take that as progress. You will continue to feel that you're not progressing, and that will frustrate you. Maybe you are actually progressing.
No, that's not true. Every year has been progressively a lot better. And internally, the kind of capacity for internal honesty and the ability to take the heat.
Wonderful.
That's all, like,
Wonderful.
no question about it. That keep, yeah.
Wonderful. But then if that progress is there, then that should make things easier, no? If you can see that things are actually materializing, that should only whet your appetite. You have personal proof that things can happen, that progress can happen. You have personal proof, irrefutable proof, that change can happen. So now why are you worried? Why don't you commit yourself further to the process? Or are you afraid of the change? Maybe the proof.
No, go ahead.
So there is proof that change can happen, and that proof itself is kind of scary. Maybe an ineffective teacher would have suited better. This one is problematic because now you have proof that he is effective.
No, you are very problematic. I can assure you of that. Yeah. No, no, I get what you're saying. It's but it's the same point that I mentioned earlier, that I don't feel like an active resistance these days. I don't feel like I'm not really even sure what I like. Obviously, the umbrella answer to what one is protecting is obviously oneself, but uh, it can be very hard for me to see that unless I actually come to the sessions like this. But it's easy to not do it just like out of whatever. You can always have some reason or some just nothing to ask at some point, and then you just kind of yeah. It's all like convenient stories.
See, it's English sessions that you listen to, right? There is a repository.
So
Hmm.
yeah, I follow the indie sessions too whenever I can. I can translate the reflections, so I try to follow those too.
Right. So, I mean, something that would definitely keep you pinned down to the sessions. Why don't you pick up the why don't you go through everything to just point out the exact parts that speak the loudest to you,
Hmm.
or that speak in the most intimate way to you?
Hmm.
Hmm? And prepare an album of those parts,
Hmm.
and that album or those parts will be very useful to the mission as well. There are these thousands of videos. We are also now in the process of publishing the best of the Hindi work in English by dubbing it, that voiceover thing. So if you bind yourself to that process, that would make it mandatory for you to pinpoint this beginning here until there is something valuable, and the other parts can be pruned out.
Hmm.
Hmm? Why not? See, because the ego is smart, so one has to sometimes just outsmart the ego. No?
Hmm.
It's a game of tactics as well. That's why in the whole field of spirituality, there has been an entire dimension full of just tactics. Sometimes people think that those tactics themselves are spirituality.
Hmm.
They are not, but nevertheless, they carry some importance.
Hmm.
I'll give you an example. I loved the the verses, the couplets coming from Saint Kabir.
Hmm.
And I was a busy person in the world, a working professional, an entrepreneur, actually, in the initial stages of his enterprise. So I was short of time. What did I do? I committed myself to creating two activities for my students. One called Kabir in Campus, other called Kabir in Corporate. Now these activities necessitated that I go through the entire corpus of Saint Kabir's sayings and couplets. I wouldn't have normally or ordinarily done that. But I constructed an activity specifically with the objective that this activity will make me go through everything that my beloved teacher has written. Now, how many couplets did I actually place in that activity? I'm not sure. Maybe 10, maybe 20. Both those activities combined, maybe 15, 20, 30 something. But to choose those 30 couplets, I went through, I don't remember, 500,000 something. So,
Yeah, I
so
can.
that's the kind of, yes, that's the kind of trick one has to play with himself.
Mm.
And that was way back in 2008, 16 years back.
No, I'll figure something like this. I'll take something like this up. But we're being pushed to close. So, but we'll continue. We'll continue for sure.
Welcome.